This is a video presentation entitled "Those Who Control Data Control the Future," and that's a quote from Yuval Noah Harari when he was addressing the World Economic Forum. So I'll let Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum and Yuval himself explain the quote for you.
Klaus Schwab is the founder of the World Economic Forum. 7 years ago, he announced plans to start tracking the entire population and merge everyone with a central machine, what he now calls the Great Reset.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity.
Here we are now with an economy in crisis, but with an incredible opportunity.
It's certainly a major crisis, but it also offers us a unique opportunity.
Unprecedented opportunity to rethink and reset.
The great opportunity for reset.
Opportunity for us to reset.
For a reset.
It's almost as if they all attended the same school of thought and studied under the same professor. Founded in 1971, the World Economic Forum is an international private organization which receives billions of tax-free dollars from its members and their global enterprises. Every year, the WEF brings together its members with world leaders, big pharma executives, tech titans, Hollywood celebrities, media personalities, and internet influencers to meet in the secluded mountains of Davos, Switzerland.
It is a tiny town folded into the Swiss Alps, a village where you could bump into Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, the head of Google, and the Queen of Jordan, all in one place. A lot of reporters cover the forum, but few get inside. It turns out there are two Davoses, one you see and one you don't. After hours, there are hundreds of private parties where deals are done. People who can't be seen together in public can meet here.
Your Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, distinguished heads of state and government, the future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room.
It penetrates the cabinets.
They will likely tend to govern a certain way.
Nobody will be safe if not everybody is vaccinated.
The names and the countries he mentioned ended up being some of the most dystopian and authoritative during this pandemic.
Names like Ms. Merkel, Vladimir Putin, and so on.
Other names? Jacinda Ardern, Sebastian Kurz, Mauricio Macri, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Ma, Gavin Newsom, Stéphane Bancel, Chelsea Clinton, Leonardo DiCaprio, Sanjay Gupta, Dr. Leana Wen, Alexander and Jonathan Soros, George Soros' sons, and several of the Rothschilds. And of course,
now who could represent such a world better than you, Prime Minister?
The dark reality of Schwab's agenda is detailed in his best-selling book, COVID-19, The Great Reset. His endgame mission is to replace independent governance with a top-down controlled, one world government and a central bank-controlled digital currency.
When they say, you'll be happy, what they mean is, you'll be enslaved.
Like most globalists, Schwab regards communist China as a shining model of how he intends to transform the world.
We now welcome His Excellency Xi Jinping. China has made significant economic and social achievements under your leadership. I think it's a role model for many countries.
He was asked which country he most admired and referred to China.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say we need to go green as fast as we need to start investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility that I know Stephen Harper must dream about of having a dictatorship that he could do everything he wanted that I find quite interesting.
We have to go one step further. It's a systemic transformation of the world.
Artificial intelligence, the metaverse, synthetic biology, our life in 10 years from now will be completely different, and who masters those technologies will be the master of the world.
Science is replacing evolution by natural selection with evolution by intelligent design. not the intelligent design of some god above the clouds, but our intelligent design and the intelligent design of our clouds, the IBM cloud, the Microsoft cloud. These are the new driving forces of evolution. But if you have enough data and you have enough computing power, you can understand people better than they understand themselves, and then you can manipulate them. You know, the whole idea that humans have this soul or spirit and they have free will, that's over. Now, how exactly will the future masters of the planet look like? This will be decided by the people who own the data.
Foreign powers can collect, store, and exploit biometric information from COVID tests.
U.S. intelligence officials tell CBS News that China is trying to collect Americans' DNA in hopes of controlling the future of healthcare.
China's test kits are a tool to help China compile genetic data.
The Chinese aren't the only ones exploring this technology. The U.S. is working on it as well.
The White House is ramping up its COVID response, announcing Americans can once again get free COVID test kits as concerns are growing over a rare...
Data is the most important asset in the world. Those who control the data control the future, not just of humanity, but the future of life itself.
Some rather profound words there from Yuval, who's made it exceptionally clear how important he thinks data is. So if data is really that important, then the next thing we need to talk about is data integrity. If data has a central point of authority or control, it means that it can be manipulated. Not only that, it means it can be cracked, hacked, altered, changed and deleted. So in order to solve this predicament, what we need is a digital network that doesn't have any central point of authority, control or failure. But what kind of network would this be? In order to not have a central point of authority or control, the network must somehow be economically self-sustaining. In other words, it must somehow produce an asset that others would be willing to compete for. But in order to encourage others to economically compete for it, the asset must somehow have a use case. If something is useful, it's valuable. If something is useless, it's worthless. So what could a digital asset do? If that digital asset or token was fixed in supply and was the only method of payment available for uploading digital information back onto the network that the asset initially came from, then that might actually be valuable, because you'd be uploading your digital information onto a network that was economically competitive and self-sustaining rather than centrally controlled. So once your data had been uploaded to it, there would be no way for it to be deleted, which would bring peace of mind if that digital transaction happened to be a financial record. And not only that, it would also be useful for digital transcripts of conversations, because it would end up being a universal source of truth. And this source of truth would also be useful for business supply chains, court records, court documents, title deeds, to name just a few. The use cases are almost infinite, because the entire world now runs on digital data, which means that digital data is simply too precious to lose. So ultimately, the entire world will end up running on this network, which means this digital token could potentially become the most valuable asset on Earth. And if something is valuable, it means it can be used as a medium of exchange and a transfer of value. So if this transfer of value is digital, it means it can be sent as fast and as efficient as light, and could therefore be used as a global medium of exchange. But before we get into the size of the market as a medium of exchange, let's first of all look at the size of the market for digital services and data storage. This market is absolutely huge, and currently Amazon makes more money from its web services than it does from its traditional business. But like all businesses that rely on fiat currency for the survival of their business, they have to charge an ongoing monthly fee, since the medium of exchange that they use continues to decline in value. It's this ongoing monthly fee that can turn into a huge expense for businesses and have a massive impact on profit margins, which ultimately dictates the business's future success or failings. So if businesses could upload their digital information onto a network for a one-off cost of a micropayment, safe in the knowledge that it would be stored indefinitely and not susceptible to cyber security hacks or virus software, that service would be hugely valuable to them. So it's the value of this service that is reflected in the value of the token that provides it. However, there are some economic considerations that need to be taken into account. For a token to be considered economically valuable, it must be classified as a commodity, and therefore a common opportunity must be provided and given for anyone and everyone else to start the network themselves. So in the same way that gold is in the ground waiting to be discovered by someone, the information on how to start such a digital network must also be out there waiting to be discovered by someone. And this is the significance of the Bitcoin white paper being released on the 31st of October 2008, as has been well documented. And as we all know, the network wasn't started until the 3rd of January 2009, when Satoshi Nakamoto created the Genesis block, which began the start of the network. Embedded into the Genesis block was a title taken from the Times newspaper, which read, "The Times, 3rd of January 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." This provided a 2 months reasonable notice period and 4 days grace on top, in order to provide that common opportunity for anyone and everyone to start the network themselves. Without this provision of a reasonable and common opportunity provided, the network would just simply be classified as a securitized network and be economically worthless, because someone would have had complete control of the starting point. In order to be classified as a commodity, there cannot be a point anywhere where someone had complete control of anything. Which leads us on to the next point, where the network had to go through a period of neutral organic growth in order to dilute the central starting point of the network. And this is why the authoring of the white paper and the start of the network was done under a pseudonymous name of Satoshi Nakamoto, so that he wouldn't have any central point of influence over the neutral organic growth of the network. And the reason he chose a Japanese name is because the Bitcoin white paper was authored in the English language and released to the Western world, and therefore giving himself a Japanese pseudonym split the starting point of the network into two entities, the white paper and the author. If he'd given himself a Western name, he would have been able to track down. If he'd used a name of a third world country, people would have had suspicions about his education and why he wasn't coming forward to receive the financial rewards associated with such academic acclaim. If he'd provided a Chinese or a Russian name, people would have had suspicions about his political intentions. So by using a Japanese name, Japan being technologically advanced, highly developed and politically neutral, gave him the highest amount of credibility. Japan also being an island nation with a large enough population and a language barrier would enable his identity to remain a mystery, to allow this period of neutral growth before revealing his true identity. So why the 10-year time frame? Well, if you were down a casino playing red or black, there is a 0.01 chance that you would throw 10 reds in a row, meaning there is a 99.9% chance that it won't happen. And so since the digital commodity itself can be replicated, what's needed is something that can't be replicated. And what can't be replicated is the neutral size and growth of the network. So after a period of 10 years, there is a 99.9% chance that no other digital network will achieve this level of neutral size and growth, which is what's unique to the Bitcoin network. So how do we know he planned this 10-year time frame? The famous Tulip Trust document was created by David Kleiman on the 9th of June 2011, and it said, "I acknowledge the trust and the transfer of Bitcoins to this trust. I have full control of all software and the keys used to manage Bitcoin as of this date, the 9th of June 2011. It is agreed that I, David Kleiman, shall become the trustee for the transfer of the Satoshi I have received from Craig Wright. No record of this transaction will be filed in the US or Australia. The transfer is valued at around $100,000 for Australian tax purposes. I acknowledge that I, Dave Kleiman, have received 1,100,111 Bitcoin from Craig Wright. At the time of this transfer, it is valued around $100,000 USD. I will form a trust to be managed by at least 3 people, but not more than 7 at any time. All Bitcoin will be returned to Dr. Wright on the 1st of January 2020. And the case over the disputed ownership of the Satoshi coins was settled on the 6th of December 2021, where a Florida court found that Dr. Craig Wright did not owe half of 1.1 million Bitcoins to the family of David Kleiman, in a court case that saw Ira Kleiman, David Kleiman's stepbrother, as the personal representative of the estate of David Kleiman, the plaintiff, versus Craig Wright, the defendant. The result of the case was published globally in many national newspapers. We can see here the Times reported Bitcoin founder Craig Wright wins battle to keep his crypto billions, and the Guardian also reported Australian man Craig Wright wins US court battle for Bitcoin fortune worth billions. And earlier in the same year, on the 28th of June, London's High Court granted Craig Wright, via default judgment, copyright ownership of the Bitcoin white paper, as the defendant, Cobra, opted not to defend the claim. Craig Wright was outed as the creator of Bitcoin and the pseudonymous author of the white paper Satoshi Nakamoto by various technical magazines. One of the first ones was Gizmodo, that published an article on the 9th of December 2015 entitled, "Here's all the evidence that Craig Wright invented Bitcoin." Another publication was Wired magazine, that published an article on the 2nd of May 2016 entitled, "How Craig Wright Privately Proved He Created Bitcoin." The Bitcoin Foundation founder Gavin Andresen also gave witness testimony to the fact that he thought Craig Wright was indeed Satoshi Nakamoto.
I do think Craig is Satoshi. I met with him in London. He fits the kind of person that I was interacting with way back in 2010, and he provided some cryptographic proof using the private key from the very first Bitcoin block to show that he possessed that key. So although it's impossible to prove something like that 100%, I think for me, he's proved it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, I'm not surprised I wasn't asked why I'm convinced Craig is Satoshi. I posted on Reddit, he signed in my presence using the private key from block number 1, the very first mined Bitcoin block, on a computer that I'm convinced had not been tampered with, on software I'm convinced that had not been tampered with, a message of my choosing.
It was Henry Kissinger who said, who controls the food supply controls the people, who controls the energy can control whole continents, who controls money can control the world. So indirectly, what he's telling us is the order in which they're doing things. First of all, they're going to go for control of the financial system and the money, then they're going to go for the energy companies and utilities, and then they're going to go for the food supply and the farmers. And so with the amount of overwhelming evidence building that Craig Wright was Satoshi Nakamoto and the inventor of Bitcoin, the central bankers knew they had a limited window of opportunity to strike and corrupt the Bitcoin network before it threatened their economic power and dominance. They had worked out that by sending a transaction in Bitcoin was like sending a transaction for a contract of value. And in the same way that a contract without a valid signature on it is null and void, a Bitcoin transaction without a valid signature attached to it is also contractually illegitimate and economically worthless. So there are 5 components required for a digital network to ensure that it doesn't have any central point of authority, control or failure. The first 2 are structural, and the first one being economic competition. A network is either centrally controlled or economically competitive. There is no middle ground. Without economic competition, you simply get collusion and centralization. And so economic competition ensures that the network is open to everyone and therefore common to all. The second is common accountability, and this is achieved through a chain of digital signatures, so that blame cannot be reassigned and everyone is equally responsible for the data that they upload onto the network. The final 3 are to do with the dynamics of a network. Thirdly, there must be a locked protocol, so that no one can change it and therefore no one controls it, and it therefore remains common to everyone, and therefore the network is permissionless for anyone and everyone to build upon. Fourthly, there must be unbounded capacity, so that limitations and restrictions could not be manufactured and the network not be manipulated. And finally, it must produce a fixed asset supply, so that no one can inflate it or deflate it, to ensure it remains uncontrolled. A change to any of the fundamental aspects of the protocol results in a realised and material change in the Bitcoin legacy addresses. And so the central bankers rushed to assemble a team of developers that could carry out their objective. And the implementation they came up with was segregated witness, which they implemented on the 24th of August 2017. And it was on this date that the Bitcoin legacy addresses started to change. Prior to this date, every single BTC legacy address recorded on the blockchain started with the number 1. But the moment SegWit was implemented and an alternative protocol created, the legacy addresses began to start with the letters BC or the number 3. And the problem with this is that when the Bitcoin protocol is tampered with, it becomes securitized, centrally controlled, and economically worthless. This was confirmed by Samson Mow, who was Blockstream's chief strategy officer at the time, when he admitted as such in front of Max Kaiser, that left him rather speechless.
Bitcoin was created by the central bankers that enslave you today. It is their scapegoat.
How do you answer those, Max and Stacey?
I think the evidence is clear that they do not control it. There's 10 years, almost 11 years now of track record.
Yeah, Blockstream controls it.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Who does?
Blockstream.
Oh,
all right.
I was looking at you when I said that.
Yeah, I'm a block. I have a spy. I'm one of the spies. No, so this, it's an interesting.
So if Bitcoin was a physical commodity, it could be represented metaphorically by a 5-sided polygon, with the 5 elements that make it a commoditized protocol. But because it's a commoditized protocol, it means it's vulnerable to being securitized, which means it has to be protected externally via patents. It was on the 12th of April 2009 that Craig Wright, under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, wrote in an email to Mike Hearn, the existing Visa credit card network processes about 15 million internet purchases per day worldwide. Bitcoin can already scale much larger than that with existing hardware for a fraction of the cost. It never really hits a scaling ceiling. And then again on the 17th of June 2010 he wrote, the nature of Bitcoin is such that once version 0.1 was released, the core design was set in stone for the rest of its lifetime. And this is because The Bitcoin network is the foundation layer of all future digital technologies, secured and underpinned by economic principles. So this has now created one of the greatest opportunities in history, because the entire world will be ported over onto the Bitcoin network due to economic incentive, and the Bitcoin network can be used for everything. So those developers who start building early will benefit the most. So here's a few examples of how it can be used.
It is 9:32 p.m. July 17th, 2021. I am in a conversation with Joe over the Bitcoin SV network. We are sending bytes back and forth from each other. Joe, do you want to tell me about this a bit?
Sure. So basically, what this is my voice. This is the first conversation to happen over Bitcoin. And my voice is basically every second, 44 kilobytes worth of it is going into a Bitcoin transaction and being propagated through the Bitcoin SV network in a way that every single node in the Bitcoin SV network will receive this specific transaction. And then that transaction will go to Hudayfa's computer, and Hudayfa's computer will unpack it, and then finally it'll play it out through the speakers. So just like IP and voice over IP works, this does the same exact thing, but on top of Bitcoin. This is voice over Bitcoin. And there are tons of bugs, but it works.
Sweet. Thanks for coming to our TED Talk.
Social media applications can be built so that posts can't be censored by a central authority. An economic incentive to provide good quality content can be provided through microchips, which the platform itself can make a profit from. Bitcoin enables every single platform to be self-financing because the asset itself is increasing in value, which enables businesses to remain profitable and ongoing. But the largest use case by far will be for financial transactions, because the Bitcoin platform not only provides a digital network that can scale for the volume requirements, but it also provides a digital platform where the data is secure. As Dr Wright informed us on the 22nd of October last year, he said, "The last of the patents related to scaling have been filed yesterday. The research shows we can scale to over 10 to the power of 11 transactions per second. The cost will be under 1/10,000th of a $1 a standard transaction. This is 100 times lower than any transaction processing system ever created. Sorry, blockchain scales." And for those wanting to work it out, 10 to the power of 11 transactions per second is 100 trillion. Bear that in mind when you realise that the Visa and credit card networks can only scale to 50,000 transactions per second. It really brings the power of the Bitcoin network into perspective. So now let's listen to some ideas from the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto himself.
At InChain, we've just funded a number of universities doing so far a test up to 1 gigabyte because it validates what we've already done independently. We've tested up to 380 gigabyte blocks. We've tested 1 million transactions a second and transaction sizes up to 20 megabytes. Super complex scripts, basically ones that can run operating systems. That's all of global commerce times about 50. On top of that, we can have complex scripts. On top of that, with payment channels, we can scale each of those transactions 1,000 times, which effectively means about 1 billion transactions per second, which means we can then have all derivatives, all complex trades. That means high frequency trading. It means everything that happens globally.
Hello, Alan. Welcome from occasionally sunny London, and I have a proposition for you. We both acknowledge blockchain technology is capable of changing the world and improving the lives of many people. But you've said you're committed to reducing the power consumption of blockchain and that you want to find ways to enable blockchain scaling. I agree with you on both counts, but both can be done already. They could always be done on Bitcoin. And let me take Tesla as an example. How about tokenizing a digital twin of every Tesla on the road so that it could interact economically with other assets? The vehicles could sell energy to one another, for instance, or they can engage in secure swaps of data. Each vehicle's history could be updated every time it passes a service interval or has another sort of event, raising its resale value through a public proof of its history. There would also be plenty of innovations for your other businesses as well. SpaceX, Neuralink, and the Boring Company could raise funds and securely distribute dividends. The blockchain could provide an auditable attestation of your supply chain to show its ecological footprint for customers or investors. All of that can be built today. No vague roadmap, no promises to break. You and I both have a long history in innovation, particularly around payments. With your transformational work at X.com and mine as Satoshi Nakamoto inventing Bitcoin, a system designed as a simple digital cash system, we can work together to change things. More personally, we've both had to deal with ill-informed and vicious critics. However, Time has demonstrated that we were simply living in a future that they didn't yet recognize.
The internet that we currently use is made up of a group of interconnected corporate servers, where each time we upload our data to it, we are surrendering sovereignty of it, so that those who own the corporate servers own and control our data. Whereas what we should be using is a commoditized digital network that is economically self-sustained by its own digital asset, meaning we own and control our own data, and there is no central point of authority, control, or failure on the network. Here's how it works. First of all, the digital information and the signature that make up the transaction data are broadcast to the network. That is then put through the SHA-256 hash function that scrambles the data to the magnitude of 2 to the power of 256, and the transaction is then assigned a hash number. The hash number is created from a previous bit of data that's been uploaded that links the transactions together. The network that the transaction is broadcast to is structured in the form of a mandala network, which is one of the most efficient network structures on Earth. This means that the moment a node picks up the transaction, it's never more than 6 hops away from every single node on the network recognizing it. The moment more than 50% of the nodes recognize the transaction, which is instantly, the transaction is then thrown into the memory pool. Once in the memory pool, miners then compete to process the transaction by building a block and finding SHA-256. The SHA-256 that they're looking for is that of the first transaction that entered the memory pool. It's this transaction that has the Bitcoin block reward programmed into it, and its hash number is created from the block header of the previous block. Once a miner finds SHA-256, the block is then capped, a block header created, and the miner is then rewarded with the Bitcoin block reward along with all the fees attached to each of the transactions that are within the block, and the process is then repeated. This is a diagram illustrating Bitcoin's distribution model. You can see here that the Bitcoin block reward started out at 50 Bitcoins per block, and the block reward is cut in half every 210,000 blocks, which is very close to every 4 years. This is because a block is created approximately every 10 minutes. So the block reward went from 50 Bitcoins to 25 to 12.5, and we're currently at 6.25 Bitcoins per block, with the next halving expected around April 2024. So as the block reward continues to get cut in half every 210,000 blocks, what's required is for the block fee to surpass the block reward, and then we have an economically self-sustaining system, which is what we are gunning for. And this is precisely what the cabal are trying to prevent. If there are not enough fees in the block from the transaction volume, the miners will simply not be able to economically sustain themselves and the system will eventually collapse. The miners on the network chase profits, and the profit return will be greatest from mining the most valuable chain. And the most valuable chain will just simply be the chain that the most people use. And the chain that most people use will have the most utility on it. So all you need to do is find a graph that represents the growth of the chain, which is the increase in the volume of data being added to it, that we can see right here. This graph is the best indication of future price predictions and movement. Again, you can find links to these graphs in the description. You might be wondering, when there's information like this out there, why more people aren't talking about it when it's so obvious? Well, that's because the powers that be own almost all the mainstream media and don't want this information out there. You can see the vertical axis represents the volume of data being added to the network, and the horizontal axis is the timeline. You can see the graph has 4 different coloured lines on it: blue, green, yellow, and red. The colours represent the various and different Bitcoin protocol forks. And the question is, can you spot the protocol with the most utility on it? I'll give you a clue. It's the network represented by the line that's heading upwards. As well as altering the protocol of BTC and taking all of its economic fundamental value away, they've also allowed and encouraged what they call a cryptocurrency market to develop. None of these currencies have gone through the commoditization process, which means they're all economically worthless security offerings. As you can see in the top left of the image, the entire capitalization of the market has grown to over $1 trillion. And just to put this into perspective, we can compare this to other historical financial bubbles. We can see the first and most famous bubble represented by the line in red. This occurred in the 1600s and is known as the tulip bubble. The period while this was developing in financial history is referred to as tulip mania. The second notable historical bubble was that of the South Sea Company that occurred in the 1700s. Thirdly, in yellow, we can see the bubble that occurred in the 1990s, referred to as the dot-com bubble. These financial bubbles developed as a result of wild speculation in the markets. The speculation was driven by fantastic stories of returns on investments, without anybody really understanding the fundamentals of what they were investing in. The result of these financial bubbles developing and then popping had devastating financial consequences for many. Yet these financial bubbles pale into insignificance when compared to the bubble that is BTC and the rest of the cryptocurrency market. We can see here, by looking at the market, that there are currently 20,161 cryptos listed. And so the question has to be, what does the majority of the market consist of? Let's break it down. The majority of the market consists of tokens, and these are mainly ERC20 tokens created on Ethereum. ERC stands for Ethereum Request for Comment, and 20 stands for its unique ID number. These tokens are created and run on pre-existing coins, and unless they actually represent an asset, they are utterly worthless. They're easy to make in order to flood a market to dilute the credibility of everything else that's listed on it, which is why they make up the majority of it. Next we have pre-mined coins, such as the likes of Tron, Stellar and XRP. These coins are made up on the spot and sold onto the market in order to finance the very ledger technology that is managed and controlled by the same central authority that created the coins. They are therefore used to economically maintain securitized networks. So unless they actually represent an asset, they are fundamentally worthless. Next we have proof of stake. The way proof of stake differentiates from pre-mined is that proof of stake often run on distributed networks. However, there is no economic competition between the various staking parties on the network. This means that there is no ongoing economic opportunity cost associated with maintaining the stake. And without an ongoing opportunity cost, economic competition cannot be created. Without economic competition to separate the various parties, you simply get collusion and centralization. Proof of stake networks are therefore securitized networks. So again, unless the coin that you're purchasing actually represents an asset, in economic terms it would be considered as fundamentally worthless. Finally, we have proof of work. Proof of work is the only system that requires economic investment to be put in order to extract economic rewards back out. It's the only way to create a common opportunity for everyone to compete fairly. There are no human barriers to entry, and therefore anyone can enter and exit the market freely. The creation and distribution method of the coins directly impacts the classification of the network. If there is no central point of authority or control over the creation and distribution of the digital asset itself, then it follows that there is no central point of authority or control over its network, meaning any data uploaded to it also doesn't have any central point of authority or control. So ultimately, it's only those who upload data to it that are responsible for it, which is why it's so important that every transaction must carry a digital signature with it. And this brings us nicely back to the 5 constructs that make up the elements of a digital commodity. We know that BTC has had its digital signatures segregated from its transaction data. We know that Bitcoin Cash has also tampered with its signatures and changed the protocol. We know that Cardano has a single miner in the form of Input-Output Hong Kong and won't allow anybody else to mine its protocol. We know that Monero is an anonymous network. We know that Dogecoin has an inflationary supply and that Litecoin had a centralized starting point, which literally means the only digital data protocol that has any economic value on the entire market is the original protocol and genuine Bitcoin that now has the name Bitcoin SV with the ticker symbol BSV. So let's have a look at some of the fundamental statistics that indicate the health, development and growth of the network. We've already seen that BSV has well over 90% of the entire data flowing up onto its network in comparison to the other Bitcoin forks, and right now has 78.65% of the entire transaction volume. These figures are a strong indication that network nodes, hash rate and price will follow. So it's absolutely essential that we use Bitcoin for absolutely everything in order to prevent Klaus Schwab and his ideology of a tyrannical, totalitarian, one-world government controlling us like cattle. The situation that we're in at the moment is explained here.
The way things are supposed to work is the government should know virtually nothing about us because we're private citizens. We're supposed to know everything about the government because they're public servants. But everything is backward right now. And also look at the media. The media is supposed to be giving us the facts and we should be formulating our opinions based on that information. Instead, the media gives us their opinions and we're supposed to decipher whether that's a fact or not.
As you'd expect, being the inventor of Bitcoin, Craig is well versed on the politics of money, and I'll let him explain.
It's all about power. This is what it all comes down to. See, what people don't understand is Bitcoin with a stable protocol takes away power. If no one can change the protocol, not me, not God, there's no power in money. Money is all about power. And this is one of the things Bitcoin has done. It has removed that power. It will remove that power globally.
Remember, digital data can only be commoditized one way, which means there will only ever be one digital commodity. And as Gary Gensler, head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, correctly said, all crypto tokens except for Bitcoin are securities. It's going to come as a shock to many that Bitcoin is now represented by the ticker symbol BSV. And so to be sure that you are actually holding a digital commodity and not an economically worthless security offering, all you need to do is check your legacy address. Because digital data can only be commoditized one way and there will only ever be one digital commodity, all genuine Bitcoin legacy addresses start with the number 1. The SegWit protocol begins with either the letters BC or the number 3, and the CTOR legacy addresses begin with the letters either P or Q. It's only the genuine Bitcoin legacy addresses that start with the number 1, which shows the protocol hasn't changed. This can easily be confirmed if we travel back in time to two of the most famous transactions in Bitcoin history, which is the transaction between Satoshi Nakamoto and Hal Finney and the famous Bitcoin Pizza Day transaction. It's clear to see, because every transaction is recorded on the blockchain, that all transactions came from Bitcoin legacy addresses that started with the number 1, which indicate that foul play is afoot, and when looking for a motive it's kind of obvious as to who's most likely behind it. So in order to escape a dystopian totalitarian future, what we need to do is start using Bitcoin and building on its network now, so that Klaus Schwab and his World Economic Forum cronies can't control our data or dictate monetary policy, because if they do, they'll destroy us all.
And remember, kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
And in the same way the central bankers stole all the gold off the citizens of the United States in 1933 due to Executive Order 6102, they already tried and failed to take Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin off him by using his best friend's non-biological brother. They're now going after Satoshi Nakamoto's blockchain technology patent portfolio that protects Bitcoin. This is by far the largest court case in financial history that's set for the 15th of January 2024 that sees the cabal masquerading as COPA, standing for the Crypto Open Patent Alliance, versus Satoshi Nakamoto, aka Craig Wright, where Craig has been challenged to prove himself once and for all. You can expect lots of skullduggery behind the scenes and some crazy events around the world as the New World Order attempt to install a totalitarian one world government before this date. And the reason this case is important is because we either have a common money used by the people to create government that works for the people, or government will create currency to control the people. These are the only options available to us. To increase your understanding and knowledge of Bitcoin, there are more video links in the description, including COVID-19, what's the connection with Bitcoin? Other videos include a brief history of Bitcoin, the rise and rise of Craig Wright, shining a light on sovereign electronic cash, farmers' food supply and money, getting started in Bitcoin, and what happened to Bitcoin. There's also a link to my channel where you can keep up to date with the daily dose of news, and my chart show, where I look at and explain all the fundamental figures behind the price. I wish you love and light and all the best in everything.